Welcome, everybody. This is Ronnie Bincer, the Hangout Helper, helping you understand a little bit about the social roles people play in an HOA. And that rhymes. I made it that way. But HOA stands for Hangouts on Air, or a live broadcast, which is what we're doing right now. And you'll have people inside the film strip with you, and I've got some wonderful friends with me that we're going to be discussing the social roles that people play in an HOA. So I'd like to start, I believe, on one end, and that's going to be with Christopher. So Christopher, can you introduce yourself a little and tell us what is involved with the social aspect of HOAs?
Okay, well, I'm Dr. Christopher Vogelman. I'm the CEO of Epic Win Systems. We are an engagement, loyalty marketing, software and consulting group, and my interest in the social roles has come about primarily through being a good NVG, which stands for non-video guest. So I've made lots of quips and comments and naturally engaged with people, and I guess that's why I'm here.
And that's fantastic stuff, yes. And then just to one side of him, I believe, is David Amerland, who has recently released a new book, Google Plus Hangouts for Business. David.
Hi, and I'm really glad to be here. We're discussing essentially psychological dynamics which allow us to interact in a video environment or in a video modulated environment. And it's really funny because the entire web, by degrees, is shifting towards a kind of transparency, the kind of human connection, where the things which drive everything are the things which have always driven everything in the pre-computer-driven world, which is how relationships are formed and how trust and reputation and authority are actually formulated after contact takes place. So I'm here because I'm interested in that, and I really want to hear what Christopher has to say.
Now this also ties into your semantic search focus, right? Because that's, as you were saying with your books that you're writing, is sort of a long path that just continues.
Yeah. It's joining the dots, yeah.
Yeah. And also we have Martin Shervington. Martin.
Hello.
Hi. Please tell people what kind of social impact happens when we're in Hangouts and things, and why you seem to care about this.
I remember when I started doing Hangouts, going back, what, over 2 years ago, and because they're real time and one of us speaks and they go into the main screen and somebody else jumps into the main screen, and it becomes a dance. And I could have said dance for you, David Amerland, being a northerner, but but that dynamic was it changed how I saw. I mean, you don't get that in Skype. So I just began to become fascinated with what is happening. How do people work together in order for the energy to flow and the conversations to flow? And so when I've run my own Hangouts, so Hangouts on Air, that has something which is, when do they work? When does the energy drop down? When do people speak for what you consider to be maybe too long? Or when you try to pull people's kind of get their voice when they're a little quieter? And that's really what I've been looking at, is how that dynamic works and shifts, and how play forms.
So, but you have a background in, you're not just a computer nerd per se. You've studied other things about people, haven't you?
Yeah, I did my degree was law business, and then I went on to do organizational psychology as my postgrad. So I look at how systems like Hangouts, like Google+, how cultures form around that, and how behaviors and how people's minds are influenced by all of those factors working together. So yeah, I have models in my head when I'm doing stuff, whether it be making posts or whether it be running Hangouts, or every word has the potential to influence somebody's behavior or not.
All right, so the influence of behavior is something that people will do when they play these certain roles. That's part of sort of the natural thing. So we did a show about a week ago, and there's links in the detail area over there, or somewhere around here. And you can watch the prior show where we went into the technical side of Hangout on Air hosts, somebody gathering the comments, somebody pushing the buttons, things like that. But along with the role of, for example, a host, is someone who directs the conversation. So it might behoove me as a role, a social role, to be the director of the conversation or the moderation in case things get a little bit out of hand. It's up to me to come in and say, "That's great, Martin. Now let's let David talk for a moment," just in case.
Why you could have said Christopher. You didn't. You said me.
I did.
But for me, it would have been Squirrel.
He's picking on you.
So the roles that we play, I think, are very important, not only in the technical nature, but in the social nature. And that's what this conversation is about, is to bring in some of that piece to the puzzle. So David, let me throw a question to you. When we talk about semantic search and the words and the meanings that we have, how do you think that the roles people might play inside of a Hangout make a difference in how that is presented? Meaning, are they serious or are they very jovial? How do you think that's going to affect things?
Well, okay. In a sense, we think they wouldn't. You can say almost anything, and it wouldn't actually have any effect outside the Hangout itself. But actually, it does, because the way we say things and the tone we take and the way we phrase things, the words we actually pick to present things, psychologically affect the dynamic of other people within the Hangout, and also the people who watch the Hangout afterwards, and also the audience that watches the live event on the events page or YouTube. All those things affect their behavior in terms of the engagement, the interaction, and the kind of opinion they form about the person doing the talking. And because everything is reputational, you begin to get a kind of engagement which reflects upon your expertise, the way you present things, then everything becomes part of that construct. So if you come into a Hangout, you may have something really valuable to say, but if you express it in the wrong way, if you perhaps use the wrong kind of phraseology or the kind of presentation that is perhaps a little bit too light or too flippant for any kind of reasons, then the effect which you will have will be perhaps not the one which you expect to have. And that's something worth bearing in mind, because we do so much work in terms of Hangouts, of how they should be presented, how we should be prepared when we go into one. And certainly, I mean, you pump out content every single day trying to prepare people. You have a paid class which people come to actually polish their skills. And there's a tendency to think, well, it's only video, it's easy, right? And no, it isn't, any more than it's easy to perhaps be an interviewer or a TV presenter or a radio speaker or even a weather girl. It takes quite a lot of training to actually do all those things.
No one going to pick up on the weather girl with David?
That was thrown your way, Martin.
So take it and run with it, Martin.
No, it's yours, Ronnie. It's yours. Go on.
Oh, okay. Well, here's a comment.
A low pressure system here.
Things you never want to see.
Exactly.
Right. So George is saying it's just like real conversations in real life when we're here inside this. Yeah.
I mean, it's not a great point, because in real life we actually are very quick to recognize the dynamic of our situation and act accordingly. And even if we don't know and we're not sure, then that also influences our behavior. And online, we haven't really had that kind of nuanced environment. We're just getting into it. And it's very, very new, which also means we have the potential to go very, very wrong.
So if I'm having a conversation with Martin and Christopher, and it just sort of has this really lull moment, and it seems a little awkward, do I need to do something, do you think? Or should we just sit here with what many people call dead air?
Dead air.
Well, yeah, it is. Well, this is interesting, isn't it? Because it also shows, I think, the importance that the interviewer or the host plays in a Hangout. Now, a lot of the times we think, here's the host, he says, hi folks, here's the Hangout, and I'm presenting, presenter A and presenter B, and they're going to discuss this. And it happens. But it doesn't happen any more than a symphony orchestra without a conductor isn't necessarily a symphony orchestra. It's just a bunch of guys playing together, not necessarily well. So the conductor is there to harmonize everything. And yeah, when you get dead air, you sense that something needs to be said. Perhaps somebody's tired, or they're unfocused, and you need to bring things back on track. And also, sometimes a subject is talked out, and there's nowhere else to go, and you need to bring in a segue that brings them into the next one. So an experienced host, an experienced interviewer, creates the scaffolding around which a Hangout basically works. And that is really important to bring to mind, because it's not a case of switching on your computer and bringing a few people in. You actually need to have a structure in mind, which becomes the general guiding shape of how the Hangout is going to go.
So here's an interesting question from Cheryl out there, saying if you're asked to be part of a panel, in the film strip area, and you don't feel like you really have anything to add, is it better to just say no, or if watching a Hangout on air, stay silent? Any thoughts on that?
Okay, yeah, Christopher, do you want to tackle this?
I think you always should try and get some degree of exposure because everyone has something to contribute. Everyone has a different perception, a different reality, and everyone has a wealth of experience upon which to draw.
Yeah, and yeah, I was gonna build on that, because I was gonna say it's just people, isn't it? I mean, it's like if you're in a conversation in the offline world, you can get kind of awkward, but at the end of the day, when you start breaking the ice, you may be with the dullest person on the planet. They actually become quite fascinating because you can get them to open up. And in a hangout environment, it becomes a lot more easy to do that. It's a very frictionless environment. So although all of us, believe it or not, have qualms about appearing on camera and talking to people and having people listen to us, it would be unnatural if we didn't. The moment we actually do this, it becomes an incredibly rewarding experience because you get to hear what other people have to say, and you get to see their expressions and their tone of voice, and it makes a lot of fun.
Now, Martin, I know that you and I have met in a lot of Hangouts, some of them non-broadcast. In other words, we're just meeting and getting to know each other. Where do you think the roles are different when we're in that type of environment versus a broadcast?
There's so many bits I want to pick up on. Can I pick up on a couple of the other bits first?
Sure, go for it. I was just helping guide, but
no, appreciate it. But this, David said that I wanted to, because I think there's so much content here. The first thing, pick up on the question. If somebody is in the Hangouts, the film strip, one of the things that I have is sometimes somebody might invite me into something, and they'll say, "What do you think, Martin?" And I'll sit there and go, "I don't have an opinion." The reason I don't have an opinion is because I don't know enough. So all I'm going to be saying is absolute nonsense. And so very occasionally, I won't say anything. And this happened in a Sarah Hill Hangout, which is a news thing. I don't know enough about it to form an opinion. And I'm okay with that, because I'd rather keep quiet than say something that's just for the sake of it. So I think that if somebody's invited in, it's great to have a point of view on what's being said. I think that's the thing, as opposed to just being present and, whatever. But this ties into the dynamic that David's talking about. When there's trust between the people in the Hangouts, when there's ease between people, it works, it flows. You're not jumping on top of each other. You're not trying to counter what the other person says. I mean, myself and David, we've done these sorts of Hangouts now, and we know that we can pass the ball and it will pass back, and it works. And I think that the more exposure you have to Hangouts, and this is then going back to the question and the advice, is you get used to that and you start to listen, you're present, and you're part of the conversation. You have something to say because you're in it, as opposed to just watching it as if you're watching from the outside. And that's when it transforms. And it's getting comfortable having a conversation with Christopher, with David, with Ronnie. And if you can do that, then you're in. And I think that solves the Hangout strip problem, is that you just feel that you have something to say because you'll start to form an opinion.
And I think it's like a conversation at a party. If you have nothing to say, you're just quiet for a while, and then when you can contribute,
just nod. Just nod your head.
Yeah, no, I do a lot of nodding.
Yeah, me too.
Here's a comment that ties in with that. This is from Kellen saying, in a conversation, dead air is okay when you know each other. In a social situation, dead air can be kind of awkward, right?
Yeah. And this is a show, isn't it? I mean, this comes to your question. The idea with this isn't that we sit here and that we're looking at our messages and that people are watching what it's like when we're working. And segueing in to your other question about how's it different with off-air, sometimes we might be multitasking a bit when we're off-air. I mean, I regularly have Hangouts where people, all they're hearing is I'm tippy-tappy typing away because I'm in my Gmail and...
Well, I'm sorry, what was that? Tippy what?
Tippy-tappy typing. Have I not ever said that before?
It's new. You've heard it here first.
Really? That's what I say. People have been in those Hangouts. They know it very well. And they used to mute me. They've given up now. But that's a different sort of Hangout. And I'll still be there listening, but I won't be looking at the facial expressions, and I won't be getting that visual feedback, and I won't be dancing. It's like it's dancing, but hoping that the steps are okay, just on the auditory, as opposed to looking down at my feet or or into their eyes. See, I'm making it a metaphor. But those are different sorts of Hangouts.
Yeah, that's so true. And can I just say that Martin said it's okay to say I don't have an opinion on that. And the amount of self-confidence and awareness that it takes to say that is in itself remarkable. And I think the fact that we can actually say that now in this kind of environment is it's a step up in the way we interact. So I think it's a brilliant point to actually bring up.
Yeah. Now, John Murphy bringing up a comment here. He's mentioning that if we accept, basically, he's talking about nonverbal communication. That effective communication is made up of 7% words, 38% tone, and 55% of the body language. Not only are the things that we say, but the actions and the way we look part of the conversation in these social roles.
That research was presentation situation, I believe, originally, because it gets quoted a lot. So you have to amplify the physical because it's like on stage or in front, you're present there. But I still think it's highly relevant. In fact, I mentioned in front of David's book, I wrote a section on nonverbal behavior for a chap. His book was called Human, and his name's Professor Robert Winston, Lord Winston. He sits in the House of Lords in the UK, and I wrote a little section which I mentioned in the foreword to David's book. And I mean, I know the importance of that, and you've got that there. This technology allows that to come across, whereas a podcast that's stripped out the visual loses it. And then you've got voice tone, and then you've got and you adjust and you modulate and so on. But the words are going to be a part of it. But we've got to look at the whole thing working together.
Yeah, and I've said frequently for a long time that the nonverbal cues that are here inside a Hangout make this thing magical because it lets us build relationships such more efficiently and quickly. Mm-hmm. And that in and of itself is a game changer in my opinion, but that brings in your role. Are we, and I'll bring this up as Ray has asked here, are we acting differently maybe because of the technologies disrupting our natural role? Are we acting differently when we're inside this kind of environment than we would otherwise?
I would, I think just defining what natural is difficult enough in itself. We've never really been able to define it any more than we can define normal. We know that there are certain ranges within which we can actually perform or act, and they're acceptable or not.
David, there's a book that I've seen the title that just cracks me up. It says, "Normal is a setting on the dryer." Clothes.
That is so true. I mean, I talk a lot in corporate environments where the very word normal begins to become questionable in itself. So never mind defining it in a very hard way. So when we come to natural, I think it comes down to intent and what we hope to accomplish, and that is there whether we are talking to our grandmother at home, where we talk differently, or to our friends over the fence outside in the garden, or we're in a social setting, or at work. Every time we communicate, it is normal within that framework and those parameters. And I think this is what we need to keep in mind. And what we are seeing is that perhaps the range of normal, with inverted commas now, is beginning to become a lot broader because the compartmentalization is going. So the person I am offline is edging closer to the person I'm online because they're both highly visible. And that is modulating our behavior quite considerably, I usually find.
And also, when you are, sorry to put it this way, but when you're lying, when you're not being true to yourself, you have to try to remember, how did I represent myself last time? And it gets really, really complex.
You have to have an excellent memory if you're going to lie.
yeah. And I think also the compartmentalization used to help us. Perhaps, with your friends you were rowdy stroke swearing stroke hard drinking. So it was good to play that thing. You didn't have to remember very hard. And with your colleagues, you were, very straight-laced, very, process-driven. And at home, you were as sweet as pie, and you never did anything wrong. Now, when you mesh all those things together, you begin to find perhaps some normalization taking place, where the extremes are beginning to be toned down, and the troughs perhaps begin to rise up a little bit. So everybody becomes a little bit more interesting, maybe.
Now, you use the word tropes a lot. I've heard that because I've followed you quite a bit lately. Can you define what tropes means to someone out there?
I mean, exactly. I mean, within any kind of situation, there are accepted parameters, and they become the tropes which perhaps characterize it. And let's take a hangout, for instance. You're in a hangout, and it's on there, you're talking to each other like you're having a conversation, but at the same time, we all are painfully aware of the fact that we have an audience who are watching us live, and also an audience who will see us, tomorrow, 6 months from now, a year from now. So essentially, the way we behave is guided by that thought, and that becomes the trope of the medium, because again, it highlights intent, what you're hoping to accomplish, which then impacts and closes the loop back on how you act and how you react.
Now, I would even venture to guess that I think it was Martin Shervington, David Amerland, and possibly Mark Traphagen had a conversation a while ago about how this activity we're doing here is influencing our online behavior. Actually, we are changing the way we act online because it's going to affect search results. It's going to last for a long time. If we're a jerk, people know we're a jerk, and we don't want them to know us that way. So it's modifying our behavior to a certain degree.
I mean, absolutely, and the clearest example of this is let's suppose you're working for the evil corporation, and you can do anything which is really bad, but this is what everybody else around you is doing, this is what's expected of you, and you do it anyway. So you don't ask if it's right or wrong, because you still need a paycheck. And one of your customers happens to be your friend. In that context, we have a clash of worlds. Suddenly, your friend impacting on your work, you're going to treat him differently. You're not going to do the evil, hard, cruel thing because he's your friend. And that's exactly where we're heading now. We're creating transparency where we can't be just one thing and think it's okay, because we're also the other thing, which is okay. So, it is changing everything.
So, Martin, when you prepare, because I know you as a very strategic thinker, when you prepare to do a post, do you think about the social role you want to play in that particular post versus a different post? And how would you bring that type of comparison here into a visual medium like the Hangout?
So there's lots of different posts that I do, and some I'd say are general social posts, and just, hey, how's it going? I'm here. If you want to have a conversation, and everybody's free just to jump in. Then, when you're talking about the strategic, there are posts, there's content, blog posts in particular, that I have intent with, and the intent is very much to amplify them as much as possible to give the message to the algorithm that this is content that deserves to surface in search because it's likely I put a lot of work into it. And that's the social SEO side. So that has a lot of background context. I use circles, I build relationships and so on that allows that process to happen. Now in the Hangouts, what I've done, particularly if I'm running my own Hangouts, is how do I create a positive experience for people who are watching around the guest. That's primarily, if you look at the way I do Hangouts on air, my aim is to try and take me out of it as much as possible and facilitate the guest being the star, which is what you want.
Well, when you say around the guest, you're talking about a featured guest, because everybody...
featured guest, which is most of the time, if you look at the last sort of 6 months, that's the sort of Hangouts on air that I've been doing more than not. More than other. So if there's more people involved, there's usually one person that's got the focus, and then there may be other people that get pulled in. But it's trying to build that person's profile and to make it a positive experience for them and for the people who are watching. So I did one recently with Barry Feldman, and the content was great. I mean, Jay Bear was a really cool one as well, because we got through so much content by just me being able to answer those questions all of the time. So that's the intent behind it, is can I create a really good piece of content that I can then, this is the next step, then turn into maybe 3 or 4 different modules, put that on the website, make bite-sized chunks, turn it into podcasts. It becomes good content.
So, but with those, were you primarily just you and Jay? In other words, just one-on-one within the Hangout?
Yeah. So I guess in that way, that's not guests. I see where you're going with this, Mr. Binzer. So they're the show cast. So if we're talking about the guests, okay, go on. Where are we going to go next with that?
Well, let's say there is a featured guest,
yeah.
and there's also people in the film strip.
Yeah. Sometimes I've got to say I have made the mistake of not allowing the people in the film strip to play enough of an active role, and that's something I've had feedback on. I haven't done that for a while, but that's something I'm aware of. Is what are you doing? I mean, actually, the one I did with Guy Kawasaki and Peg the other day, we had Stan, we had Hillary, we had Lee Smallwood. That was very much trying to get the conversation going, bouncing it around, and doing exactly what you're talking about, which is being a director. And keeping it light and keeping it fun and moving it on at the right point. And again, bringing in the people who are on the comments tracker, or people who were featured because we had a particular quest going on that day. So yeah, I mean it's making it an enjoyable. This is the thing. This isn't television. You know, we're live right now. Yeah, and we can bring people into that live environment, and that's why I think a lot of people watch, is because they feel part of the show. So
Yeah.
you want the people in the Hangout to feel part of it. The other thing we haven't touched on is actually inviting people into the film strip who are watching. You know, on the comment thread. That's a really cool way of making it, because people feel that there's a chance that they're going to get involved as well, and they're more active. And there is a lot of behavioural shaping. Let's look at this. I mean, David's touched on this. You choose what to write as a comment. It's a choice. And you can edit it after. You know, some people go and delete them after if they said the wrong thing and all this sort of stuff. But usually it's seen. You leave a comment and it's there, and we get that, and it hits our attention and gets through, and we experience it. Now, you don't have to rush to make a comment. You know, on Twitter, I think people's thought to tippy-tappy typing process is really short, and it probably should be a little bit longer on occasion. You know? But on Google Plus, you're there. It's a comment thread, and there's a little bit of competition. I want to get in first. I want to get that. You know, but actually, if you take a step back and don't rush, you don't have to spill the thought. You can formulate the thought, and that's the thing that I noticed, that people on the Hangout are generally really engaged around the content and want to be contributing in a positive way. This is, again, it's another exceptional thing with this.
That's a brilliant comment to bring up, because also, I mean, I love the Twitter example, because Twitter is primarily a vertical. You know, you're there in a box, perhaps like a pipe, and you're sending information out. But when you're involved in a Hangout on air, even if you're on the event page, you're very much part of an interactive environment. People around you are making comments, and you're bouncing off them, and your ideas are feeding off them. And everything you say is also influenced by that. So it's very much a communal environment in the full sense of the word, because you can see what other people are thinking. And I love the fact, you said about your own posts, Martin, and what I admire about the way you do it is that even when a post is light, with inverted commas, you can see that there's thought behind it. You can see there's an awareness that the audience will see it, and they will interact and engage with it in a certain way. And certain inferences can be drawn from that. And in G+, we're both the lab rats and the people running the experiment. We can actually, we are aware of the dynamics, and we can test them. And a lot of times, a lot of the insights you draw afterwards are part of the kind of light social sharing, stroke interaction and engagement that you get, which again, it's fantastic, but it shows perhaps the dual role that all of us are playing here, in terms of we analyze and see how others interact, and then we accordingly modulate our own behavior and interaction, which then goes back impacting upon them, which changes everything, which is why it's constantly growing and constantly evolving.
And now we frequently are trying to guide behavior by our actions. And many times, for example, I posted in this event a picture that had ideas of roles because I wanted people to add comments. Yeah, I can identify with that. I'm a party guy, or I'm a wallflower. And by the way, wallflower, that was a hard one to graphically put in there, but I tried. These roles that we play will be part of our personality, and they will be used to influence the changes that we want people to have. I did that on purpose to hopefully elicit some comments. Christopher, do you have some ideas about how, when we do things, it's influencing behavior?
It's interesting you say that, because we're always on some sort of... Many years ago, I actually had the pleasure of studying with and on a regular basis having dinner with B.F. Skinner. So and we used to joke behind his back, don't be a clod, use behavior mod. And so operant conditioning and the whole reward system was ingrained in me, and I was quite a rebel because I was more of a Jungian and the anti-behaviorist. But what's happened over the last decade or so is that I'm coming full circle back to Professor Skinner. And so there is a reward system that you can perceive within the Google Plus environment itself, just from plussing people, from sharing events like you just talked about. And there is this encouraging people to participate. Someone wants to get noticed, so they will make comments, and perhaps they will be able to achieve some sort of recognition from an influencer, or they just want to make friends. I mean, David McClelland, the professor I had for worked as his research assistant too, he talked about achievement, affiliation, and power. And power was one of those things where people sought influence and to be able to engage with people and to help them. I see all these factors coming into play within the G+ environment, and particularly in Hangouts. And it's really interesting to come full circle back to my roots.
Yeah, that must be really fascinating, because you're right. There is a strong element of gaming in terms of the dynamics. You know, in games, when you play games, in video games, right, there's a strong feedback loop, because you know the setting and you do something and you have an intent, and then you get immediate feedback, which allows you to feel good about what you're doing. And then also you feel that you can do it, even if it's momentarily impossible. You don't think it's impossible, you just think you need to apply yourself harder. And that's the same thing with G+. You're absolutely right, because you know, we engage with people, we get feedback, whether it's asynchronous or instant in real time, and it feeds on itself. And you know, one of the reasons why this feels so different, perhaps, to, let's say, Facebook or YouTube before the integration, which used to be, you know, the Wild West and anything went. It's exactly because of this kind of transparency in the connectivity which the feedback loop provides. So yeah, I mean, that's fantastic. A great point to make.
And there's this degree of mastery. I think the more comfortable a person feels with Hangouts and with Google+, they have that sense of achievement. And very often people will work, we know this in the gamification industry, people will work far more for status than they will for money or any sort of physical reward.
Yes, you're absolutely right. That's brilliant. That's really, really cool.
It's interesting how over time things change because you get ease in the relationships with the people that you're there with. I mean, I remember even less than a year and a half ago when I first interviewed Guy Kawasaki. That was a really big thing for me, and I was nervous beforehand, and I did loads of preparation, and then again this week, it was like, well, you know, I've had so many interactions with him since, and the relationships got ease. You know, I know that he'll take my email and he'll come back if I've got a question. It's like when you get to that point with whatever way you are going, then it's about relationships that work. That's all it is. So all of the tools are ways to find, well, are ways for us to connect. And that's what I really think, is when you've got the connection, then these can be there if the relationship flows. I mean, Christopher, we connected on Threads. By you being funny, actually.
And this is the first time I've ever been on a Hangout with you.
Yeah, but I know that you put effort into, and this is what happens, and this is the slightly strange thing on Google+, is the more effort somebody puts into wanting to build the relationship, the more you notice it. If you pay attention, you're going, do you know what? They've gone to my About section, or they've been following my stuff, or they've gone to the blog, or they picked up on that little bit of a podcast, and now they're coming back and they are helping me know that they care enough about building this relationship. And that, when you get that, it's like, and that happens for multiple points and multiple threads, and then you go, okay, this person wants a connection. Let's have the connection, and it's not with an outcome. And this is one of the big shifts that's happened for me on Google+, is instead of chasing, I am building the relationship because, it's like, just build the relationship.
Yeah, organic and natural.
It's a really different way of thinking. It's a network thinking, as Thomas Power would say. And it's about support. How can I help? How can I help everybody? And the Hangouts are the central way. Going back to the other sorts of Hangouts, I'm in Hangouts as much as I can be with different people and, you know, one-to-ones, groups, because I know that as soon as you get face-to-face, then the relationship forms another level. And when you get together in real life, bam, it's kind of done then, in terms of, you know, you've become, hopefully, friends.
Right, but even before it goes to real life, I've noticed that when I'm in a Hangout with someone, and even if I just meet them once, and I build a little bit of a relationship, from then on, when I see their text, it has a different feel.
Yeah. I mean, just to counter what your friends beforehand. I mean, Ronnie and David. I don't know how many Hangouts we've had. But it's like when I do meet you, it'd be like, all right, it's not going to make any difference really because we've already got that bond. It's just in real life. It's when I saw Mark Trapp for the first time, I was like, oh, you're bigger. That's it. And then we carried on having the conversation we had online. I mean, that was it.
I thought you were going to say, oh, he's shorter than you thought he was.
Well, don't tell him that.
Oh, okay. don't listen to this, Mark. Don't. Okay, so the social norms that we see in real life apply right here. But the other part is that we're being watched from the outside. So it's not. So I don't have so many negatives. It is a lot like a party. A lot like a party. And so I'm starting to think, even though I've always hated that phrase, which I'm glad they got rid of, hangout parties, that it is a party. Because if we're talking to each other and we're partying. No, I don't. No.
Party.
It's a party where we are interacting with each other, but others are able to watch us. So we're like on stage at a party. So are there certain roles you think that work better in a hangout? Like, what if I'm a real serious, quiet individual? Is that something that's going to work well?
This is the old debate about extroverts and introverts. And the thing is, both extroverts and introverts have a lot of interesting things to say. And it's simply the level of stimuli, which is different for each one in terms of how they then get their reward and the feedback. And extroverts, funnily enough, require a lot less stimulation in order to feel that they've done something. So, somebody who's an extrovert becomes very outgoing very quickly, and by the same token, requires relatively little interaction to feel that they've achieved whatever it was they achieved, and they're engaged. An introvert is a lot more thoughtful, and usually they bring in a lot more to the table in terms of depth and sensitivity, simply because of the way their brain is structured. And I'm oversimplifying things a little bit here, but that's what it is. So to actually have introverts in a hangout, I think it's a brilliant thing to do. And classic example is Eric Enge, who's a self-professed introvert, and we all know he's absolutely brilliant in hangouts. He makes jokes, which is perhaps the way he connects and overcomes his own sense that he doesn't want to. And then what he brings to the table in terms of thinking is absolutely whoa. And that it comes from a place where he's thought about it very carefully. And that goes to show that the traditional divides of introvert, extrovert, and the labels we accepted are perhaps in a sort of stage of fluidity. They're being again modified and modulated by this kind of transparency and contact. And I think it's an amazing world right now. I mean, Christopher must be thinking, "Whoa, this is a real laboratory."
I was thinking of that because there's an article I ran across recently out of Forbes magazine from last year, and it basically states that the ambiverts will inherit the earth as far as the business community is concerned, because you need to be able to be both introverted and extroverted.
Yes, that's the best of all worlds, isn't it? Really, because you're really thoughtful, but you connect easily.
Exactly.
So I'm going to bring up a comment Susan just mentioned, or I'm just seeing now, that it was like the early days of cable TV, where there were few rules, and early days of the live camera feel, where it kind of shakes a little. It's not 100% polished, and that's part of the beauty of it.
Yeah, we like the connectivity. Well, we like it because it feels more authentic. Over the last 120 years or so, we've begun to become very wary of anything which is over-polished, because it appears to be a facade which is hard to penetrate. And being able to connect at a sort of a less perfect level and project a humanity through it comes back to this human-to-human connection. I mean, Martin has remarked upon it time and again, where he said, it's people connecting, and you can't fake that, and you can really see the dynamic. And if you don't connect with people, it doesn't matter what you say, it doesn't matter how good you are, it's going to fail, because people are not prepared to take you at face value anymore. And I think that's the greatest challenge, and also the greatest opportunity we're facing here.
Now we have a generic comment from Monica out there that I'll just bring up every once in a while, like this. Exactly.
Hello, Monica. I'm just going to give a shout out to Sandra as well to say thank you. And I'm reading all the comments on the side, so even though I won't pull people up because it's Ronnie's show, but I'll say.
No, you can pull them up. That's if you want to.
No, and to Ross as well. It's cool. So I wanted to pick up on something that we haven't touched on, which came up earlier about authenticity. And because people say just be yourself, it's like, well, actually, let's look at this, because if you're at a party, you may not tell that joke to the group of grandmothers and great aunts that you have over there, but you might tell that joke to the people over there, and it could be a different age group or so on. And I think this is something that I've been going through is when do you push it? And do you push it on a Hangout on air? Or do you do, which is what I do, which is if I'm doing stand-up, I'll show people the set. And people will go, oh, God, I didn't realize Martin did that. It's like, I do that. Go and check out my channel. I'm pretty open. I've done that for a little while. But I won't necessarily do that within a HOA. I hopefully make it fun and enjoyable and engaging and so on. But I may not make that joke because that joke may not be appropriate for the people that are watching. And in order to be as inclusive as possible, I try and do that. So the whole thing about authenticity, it's like it can be you, but you don't have to be playing that role. See what I did, Ronnie? Oh, genius. At that particular
Yeah, you got the role word in there.
self-congratulatory genius. Is that a role? Did you put that down? I want that. That's a good one. But you know what I mean? But it's like you don't have to do that thing all the time.
Right. Well, it's contextual. It's contextual, and you will adapt according to the situation. Yeah.
Yes.
And look at swearing. Let's talk about swearing. I mean, we have a choice to ruin Ronnie's channel right now. I've got a list of words.
Are these the George Carlin words?
I'm about to read. I've seen George Carlin. He got away with it. So starting with no. But the thing is, we have a choice whether we swear and whether we swear on threads and whether we allow. And I made the decision that I wasn't gonna do that. I'll swear in real life and I'll swear for effect in comedy, and that's okay. But I've made the choice that within this context, I don't want to do that, because I don't think it's the most useful way of being and of doing it. And the same as I wouldn't within a meeting with people where there's a very high social risk to doing that. So I think that the authenticity thing, you've got to find your place and be comfortable with the decisions that you make, but knowing that there's a range.
Right, and I'm going to bring up from Bill here. He's saying basically, just like in real life, being yourself means acting according to the situation. Here's another one from Peter saying, imagine if your parents of the guests in the HOA are watching. That would be a bit like going to a party escorted by your mom or your...
But that actually is a reference point. I think that's the interesting thing, is that we have these reference points, which are, and if you lose them, I mean, I know that people have got in touch and gone, oh, I saw that on your YouTube channel. I forget that people look at my YouTube channel that aren't on here. And that's why the decision to put my stand-up on there was made. And it's like occasionally, there's about 10 views, but occasionally people might find it and then come back and go, oh, you made that joke. And it's like, it's a little bit cheeky. It's like, okay, I'm all right with that. You know, but you have to go through the reference point. If my mum was to watch it, she'd probably just roll her eyes and just, oh, you know what? That's okay. But any more than that, you don't want that little sit-down teenage conversation. Oh, you know, don't use that word. You know, and that's my choice.
So, Martin, I have a question for you, because in earlier days, I would see you more frequently invite more people into the film strip.
Yeah.
And nowadays, I see you having fewer, or at least maybe that's just me noticing that. Is that a conscious decision, and why did you make that change, if it is?
Yeah, it was because I wanted to focus on the guests more than on trying to bring the film strip in. There's the truth. Now, there's a downside. Here's the upside to that, is it's meant that I've been able to tighten the content and ended up with, I've used the Jay Barrett, in an hour we've covered so much cool stuff. It was great. If I was focused on, okay, I've got to now make sure that the people in the film strip are made as part of it, it makes it harder for editing, for instance, because, I mean, you know, if you're chopping things up, that's harder there. But also, it creates a pressure that everybody has to be involved. Now, that's the why I've gone that way. However, here's the downside: it's not as social. It's going for a coffee with somebody and sitting down and having an hour, as opposed to having a mini cocktail party.
But when you say it's not as social, is it not as social for the people in the film strip or for the viewers?
Well, if people aren't in the film strip, then I don't feel that it's a social a hangout. I don't believe the party is quite a social. Now, we've got people who are looking through the windows, Monica and Jeff and Ross and Bill and Mark, and they're all looking through the windows right now at us, you know, in it, and they're included, they're part of it, but they're not in that dance. And I think that the downside of the way that I've been doing it is that people don't feel that they're in it as much as they did, and that's something that I am looking at with certain hangouts in the future, how to make it work more for a community.
So about the community, just to bring that sort of into the idea of community, because that's a big part of what we do here on Google+. And anywhere online, honestly, we're building and working in essence, managing community. So as a leader in an environment for community, you have certain outputs or outcomes you want that you're hoping will happen. Like I've got a wonderful community, which you can see behind me, the name Hangout Mastery. It's a place where I train people how to use Hangouts, but because I'm a helper, the DNA of the community is such that when members come in and they start to learn, they start to help other people. And this is wonderful. I mean, this is how I hoped that it would go. Are there methods, and I'm going to ask this to Martin and also Christopher, because I know you both have ideas about the behavior or the guiding of what's going on. And David, feel free to chime in when appropriate. Are there things that you do to encourage people to act certain ways when they get into a community? I know we started with a Hangout on Air, but think of it that it's a little mini community that we got right here. So, Martin, ideas of encouraging activity?
So, for around about 2 months, we've closed the doors and on the Plus Your Life community and the Plus Your Business community. And Plus Your Life will start to come on board in a little while. But for Plus Your Business, we are now meeting and greeting everybody that comes in. We're sharing circles with those people, with information of what they can do for the free courses we have, and the engagement's gone through the roof on it. Now, the reason we've been doing that is because we're moving towards the academy stage now, so that people can go through structured learning and certifications. So that's one thing, is utilizing the system, which is why until we closed the doors, we couldn't find out who was arriving. It's one of the things. So once we've done that, we can then change our behavior, which changes the behavior of the people who are getting involved. So, I mean, that's one thing. I mean, I don't know if you want me to do the lead into what's coming up next, Ronnie, but I can.
Well, you can. Go ahead. Give us a little of it.
But for those that look at him, Pluster. But for those that don't know, I mean, what I've been working on is a community engagement tool which allows for programmable desktop notifications for people to be triggered based upon criteria the community moderator sets. So alongside this, we've got a badging system which allows people to be given badges based upon circles that they're in, and again, the community can decide if the person's the engager of the week or if they're level 1, and it's all down. It's a solution for moderators. Now, what we're looking at is how do we deepen the relationship with every single person at a time, as opposed to seeing everything as numbers, which isn't how we are. It's not what we do. So it doesn't matter if you've got 9,000 people in the community, it's the relationship with that one person, it's the information that person gets that matters. And because notifications tend to get turned off very regularly in communities, this is a way of dealing, particularly on Chrome, with a system dynamic. Notification gets turned off, you have to ping the person in, or they have to turn up, or it's in the stream occasionally. So this is what we're doing, is coming up with ways to increase engagement, but on a very personal level. And that's going to come out soon, within a month.
Okay, and Christopher, ideas about influencing behavior?
You can do things along the lines of points, badges, leaderboards. Those are the typical PBL solutions that we see in gamification. But sometimes it's sort of like herding cats. And so,
look at that!
Snowshoe the Hangout Cat has his own page. So anyway, every day is Catter Day here. So anyway, but there are ways of modifying behavior. In particular, if you have some sort of a status that people can attain to, but also if you have a preamble to your community, like here are the rules of engagement, or here are the rules of the game. This is allowed, this is not allowed, and when people begin to deviate from being a good player, then you bring them back, or you kick them out of the game and say, I'm taking my ball and going home.
Absolutely. And that's the community guidelines are great if people read them like that.
Well, there's the if, yeah.
Yeah, that's the thing, but I agree. I mean, everything we're looking at is the leaderboards and everything based upon the principles that people quite like to know where they're going. I mean, we've had communities now for 18 months, best part of, beginning of December 2012, and we're moving into another phase. And even though Google may well be bringing out other features, it's the stuff that I'm doing is because I know the community members would appreciate being able to see where they're going and progress, as opposed to it just being public.
Right.
I'm excited because of the things that we know, Christopher, that people quite like to feel that they're engaged in a process.
Yeah, and they want that path to mastery.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so I'm going to bring up a couple things to tie it right back into Hangouts on Air for just a moment, because that's what we're doing here. And I'm the host, and I have the buttons. I can push it. So this is from Denver Prophet Jr. saying, I do feel a part of a Hangout when my comments and questions are engaged. And part of that engaging is bringing it right on the screen, where Leela's saying, when my questions are answered, I feel like part of the Hangout instead of just a watcher. So the methods that we're talking about right there, Martin, about and Christopher, about influencing and guiding behavior. Some are even called, I mean, the term gamification. I'd like for you, Christopher, to help us understand a little of that, because I think it's not really understood. But some of the things that we do naturally, I want people, for example, to watch the shows that I do, because I can then influence and encourage them to get better with Hangouts or use the Hangout tool as an example. And maybe they'll become a member of my mastery group because this is how I can help them even more efficiently. There's a reason why I want to get people engaged with what I do.
I mean, you want that inclusion. So people really do want to have an affiliation for something or someone or a cause even greater than their own. The gamification word it's a bugaboo. Game designers hate it. But it's basically taking the motivational triggers, those psychological triggers that make games so engaging and, if might even say, addictive, and layering them into a non-game situation, a business or an organization. And typically, it's to create that greater degree of engagement, to create eventually undying loyalty to you, your organization, and then to, hopefully in a business situation, increase revenue.
Now, you're saying many of these things are natural. It's just
right, absolutely.
The terminology, the gamification ideas and things. I've been chatting with Christopher outside of what we're doing right now, and we've talked about some things. In fact, Christopher's going to be doing a show talking about gamification or loyalty marketing or whatever term of the week.
We'll come up with a term. We were looking at behavioral guidance because it was a lot easier for people to swallow than behavior modification. But eventually, it's a show about influence. In fact, the working title we have is Epic Influencers. So we interview people who have influence and also give instructions and guidance on how to become more influential.
But this is a natural thing, but the idea is, if you think about it and you plan with that in mind, then things move along more differently than just naturally happening every once in a while. It can be more of a structured process that you're doing. So David, let me ask you a question about semantic search and Hangouts and the combination of the natural behaviors that we're encouraging. Are you seeing changes based on, for example, feedback you're getting from the book that you recently wrote about Hangouts?
Yes. People are thinking about it a lot more, and they're thinking about the way they engage with people and how they do it. And also, I think, which is a good thing, is they're beginning to ask themselves why they do certain things. And I think that brings us back to intent. I mean, both Martin and Christopher spoke exceedingly well about the environment. I know from experience of the PYB community, which Martin owns, and I'm one of the moderators.
And by the way, PYB means plus your business, just so you know.
The reason it works so well is because Martin has done an incredible amount of work to structure the process for the moderators, and then in return to structure for those people who get into the community. And to see the importance of environment, if we take any of us, it doesn't matter who it is, and we put them smack bang in the middle of Afghanistan in the Kandahar province, which is one of the most dangerous places on earth, the way we would behave would be incredibly violent, perhaps because we need to survive, if not we're going to die, and also certainly not the way we think we behave right now. And then if you take, again, any of us and put them in the middle of the White House during a conference, the way we would behave would be extremely different. And we'll be the same person, behaving naturally in that environment, because the structure of that environment is exactly what's enabling us to behave that way. And we are embedded in it in terms of that environment gives us a feedback system. So, for instance, if you take out a gun in the middle of the White House and say, it's not going to be a good experience, but if you take out a gun in the middle of Afghanistan, well, that is certainly going to help you in what you're trying to achieve. And that's exactly the kind of link of the person, the motivation, the understanding, the intent, and the environment has in a process which allows us to move forward. And to bring it back to what both Christopher and Martin said, that's exactly what they're talking about. I mean, Martin is already doing it to an incredibly nuanced level within the Plus Your Business community. And if anybody joins there, I mean, it's a learning lesson in itself, because the moment you come in, you suddenly feel you've entered an environment which is empowering and allows you to understand what you're doing better and allows you to connect with people who are there to help you. And this is exactly what Christopher is saying when he talks about gamification in a greater sense. It's breaking down that kind of behavior into actionable, clearly understood steps. We live in a world that's entirely transparent. Semantic search is supposed to make it better, and that wasn't the real intention, really. It was supposed to make search better, but that's exactly what's happening. And all this kind of knowledge, all this kind of understanding we're gaining right now, it's actually allowing us to structure our own behavior better and differently, and to make better choices. And that's also a win.
So there's a lot of structure involved. Martin,
yes.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so, and without, in terms of Plus Your Business, without Stan Bush and Hilary Snyder meeting and greeting people on the front end, the changes that we put in place wouldn't be happening. And without the moderators being there to answer questions, it wouldn't be happening either. So the systems, yeah, we can adjust the systems, and the culture forms through the interactions, but it's also the behaviors of everybody. It's the moderators and the members that then determines the environment. But I wanted to pick up, actually, on a point, because this is really, Susan, this is really important to me. Firstly, people don't have to agree, and it's okay to say in comments, and that's fine, and we can listen to that and go, okay. Now, the thing is, with this point, it depends on the nature of the hangout.
Can you read that just in case people weren't
yeah, sure. Okay. Don't fully agree, Martin. I think if the HOA is promoted as having a party, and there's somebody left a comment and it disappeared, as having a party or gathering in the comment stream, that would be important to promote and lead people towards. Now, this is where I think that there's something to know. When I'm talking about interviewing somebody, and I'll say, come on, check out the interview, it's a nature of content that may not be quite the same as this, for instance, because I go for half an hour, and I might try and pull some comments in, but the focus isn't on the people watching as much as it's on the guests. Now, there's other hangouts that I do that it's all about the guest. The one with Guy and Peg, and somebody said something about that the other day, is how do we bring in as much of that those people watching? The reason why is sometimes if I'm talking with you, Ronnie, and I'm focused on you, and then I go to the comment stream, and I need to read the comments to decide whether to pull that back in as the host, it's very, very hard. And it's not fair to the guest that I'm taking my attention off to bring in the commentary. So that's a different nature of Hangout, because my focus for that time, if I've got Chris Brogan, which I have next week, I've got Chris in the Hangout, he wants my time and attention. I want a conversation with him. It's going to be more enjoyable for him and for the audience longer term for me to get, and that's why it's a different sort of Hangout. Right. Whereas a general, and it's a half hour, it's not an hour. That's the other thing.
And that role we talked about, bringing in the comments and assisting, is something we talked about with the other show where we had the technical roles that people play. There's a comment wrangler. They help find those comments, bring them up so that as a host we can stay focused on our primary guest or our goal with the Hangout.
Because if you're the guest and somebody's not paying attention, you're kind of like, I'm here.
You're like, why am I here?
That's really important. It's because you've got to make it. Otherwise, the guest will go, I don't like Hangouts. You know what I mean? Because that person didn't pay me the attention because I thought it was all about me for half an hour or whatever. So that we've got to look at the nature of the Hangout and the nature of the comment stream and so on as well.
So it's one of those, it depends. We play this role based on, it depends on the situation.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's not just the environment, though. You're absolutely right. And the environment is fluid. It just depends on the, what makes Hangouts so amazing is that there are syntheses. There are syntheses of the interviewer or the host and his personal style and experience and expertise. There are syntheses of the guests and what they're like and what they bring to the table in terms of knowledge. There are also synthesis of the environment in terms of the event and the interactions there. So all this comes together, and it makes a unique amalgam every time. A Hangout is totally unique, even though they may be...
A unique, what was that word?
Unique.
Amalgam or amalgam, depending on...
Oh, sorry, it's amalgam.
Potato.
A gathering together. I've seen people wondering about niche and niche lately, so we're going to have the pronunciation show later.
It's about, it's like a mix, and the mix itself is unique every time. And it's because of all that, and that's, it's a chemistry. And if you think about it, human relationships, human-to-human marketing, it's all about the chemistry. It comes back down to what Martin's been talking about since the year dot, and Christopher always talks about when it comes to it. It's that chemistry which actually makes things work. And if it's not there, it's not there. It's not happening.
And it's even potential you might start a hangout with one role and then shift to another when the chemistry calls for that, and it all of a sudden flows better when you get right down to it.
Yeah, I mean, as a matter of fact, I'll give you an example. Christopher and I have a running joke talking about sacrificial lambs or goats.
We only have about 1 minute. We can't get too far into the sacrificial.
to make the internet gods work. And if you think about it, it's ridiculous, right? Here we are grown men talking about serious things, and we waste time on this. But it's part of what makes it fun. It's a human connection, and it's such a humanizing element to this, that it makes everything else possible. It makes it easy for us to exchange very serious opinions because we've actually connected on that really silly...
Well, there's a lot to humor, as we well know, and we'll wrap it up with this. The idea that sometimes humor will break through the barriers that are naturally there, and we get to know each other on a different level, and then when we go serious, it'll have bigger impact faster because we've already built a relationship, maybe based on the humor to begin with.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, we all said exactly at the same time, so that's fantastic. So everybody out there watching live, thank you for being part of this, and I want to thank all of the Filmstream guests as well. I'm very honored to have you here, and I appreciate you being here, and we'll see you in another show very soon. Bye now.
Bye-bye. Take care.